Hello, all my amazing friends. My name is SherriAnneDuffy-King, and I am the author slash writer of the Title of a Crucified Innocent series. I've written The Prince in the Mirror, which is book 2, and this one is book 3, Wyler's Waterdweller Secrets. Now we are going to continue on from chapter 31, which is titled West Chase. Now come with us. This is getting good. Absolutely love this world. We ready? Now, Riley ran west through the thick forest, headed as far as she could go to get away. The rain had stopped, but the thunderclaps across the night stars and dark clouds were loud. She looked up as she slowed to take a breath. There sat a planet that was converged in complete water. In front of the water planet Eldor, a huge Amgon widow flung across the trees, landing hard in front of her. An owl sound let loose, and down slammed an Amphia Omnarch. It had huge jeweled axe that it swung down on the spider, smashing it into nothing. The Amphia Omnarch turned toward Riley, smile dripping blood. It started to close in on her. Oh, what kind of mess is she in? Chapter 32 Whispers. Felix the Unknown Lichen Man and Cyrok Malutra appeared in front of her and started to attack the Amphia Omnarch. It was amazing that suddenly everyone was working together to defeat this creature. Taylor grabbed Riley and pulled her away as far as they could go without getting caught. When Taylor was done running, he stopped to check if Riley was okay. "Are you okay, Riley?" It was strange to Riley that Taylor would ask that question. He was always concerned with his own self. "Yes." He sat down next to her. "Riley, I'm sorry for everything. I just had this pull to you. I could never seem to control myself, and when you kissed me on the shore, I just felt like I was yours instead of always trying to make you mine. I really want you." Riley looked at the boy who tortured her since she started Rosemont Peak Boarding Academy. "Taylor, if I sleep with you, will you just leave me alone?" He smiled, Riley. "If you sleep with me, I will try to leave you alone." Riley hated this discussion, but she needed him to stop being overbearing. She turned to him and kissed him deeply. All she saw was Alfred in her mind. Taylor was gentler than when he was forceful. Afterwards, Taylor covered Riley up with his cloak, and they slept next to each other for warmth until the two suns rose. Riley stood on the edge overlooking a raging ocean, waves smashing against the rocks below. She turned her head. Beyond the wavering glass stood an enormous castle made from blackened stone, the Black Castle. A gust of wind flipped through Riley's hair. She reached into her pockets to pull out the necklace, the twin golden stiff. She spun the dial. Everything stopped. Warm arms wrapped themselves around her. She could feel him, his chest against her back, his breathing tickling her neck, leaving small kisses that sizzled with more passion than anyone could have hoped for. "Alfred." Riley turned to him. He brushed her hair from her tear-streaked face. "Yes." She kissed him. "I will find you, my Waterdweller." Just as fast as the wind stopped, it started up again. Alfred screamed, trapped inside the ball. The dwarf picked up the ball, smiled, and tossed Alfred over the edge. Riley screamed enough to shake the heavens and alter the curtains of demented clouds that covered above her sky. Suddenly a bright light and a silhouette of a man stood above her. Chapter 34 Rising Suns. Riley felt fingers caress her cheek, playing with her strawberry curls. She opened her eyes, blocking the light from the silhouette of a tall, broad-shouldered man. His eyes were a stunning emerald. "Hello there." Riley sat up from a sleeping Taylor. "Hi." The man knelt down. "So you must be Princess Margaret Riley Elena Wyler." Riley nodded. His broke accent sent shivers up and down her spine. My name is Aiden McTavish. He smiled a brilliant smile. I was created for the sake of your mother, with the essence of your father, yet I am my own being. Lucy made sure of that. Aiden helped lift Riley up from the ground. Do you know where Evie is? Riley dropped her head into her hands. No, I don't know who she is or where she is. Chapter 35, Escaping Amgon. Taylor sat up from under the blanket. Felix, Cyrok, Mutra, and Aiden stood around him. What? It got cold last night. Have none of you heard of body heat? Had to keep her from hypothermia. He shrugged with a sheepish grin. I was a gentleman. Nothing happened. He got up and winked at Riley. A strange sound interrupted their surroundings. Riley watched as a long, coiled snake stripped from the cobwebs-infested trees above. When they hit the ground, they shifted into a native people. Bows and arrows, swords and lances pointed at the five of them. Chapter 36, Escaping Amgon, Part 2. Zarok, Malutra, and Aiden growled at the surrounding enemy as a heavy mist changed them into lichens. Daggers were drawn. Felix and Taylor stood shocked. Get her out of here, Aiden growled at the two boys. Riley ran, once again, from the troubles that seemed to ensue. Everything went silent, and the thunder of footfalls rang deaf in Riley's ears. She stopped behind another willow tree, resting for a bit. Taylor and Felix were gone. Riley took a look around to where she had come from. Nothing. She started to back up. She turned back around and stumbled into a man in a loincloth. He kept walking toward her. She felt into her pocket as she stepped back into a tree. She found the golden trinket that she was looking for. She spun it in her pocket. All time stopped. Birds in flight stopped in midair. But this man didn't pause. He gritted his teeth and came closer to her. Why wasn't it working? He was still able to function. Fearing for her life, she reached up and blasted him with the biggest power burst she could muster, knocking him down 10 feet away, killing all other forest growth around her. She had never felt so much power escape her. With it, her energy escaped, and she fell to the forest bed. Chapter 37, Chaotic Capture. Riley felt her body roll over to the other side of a box she was tossed into. The tumble made her open her eyes. Bars wrapped around and over them. Some animal fur covered the outside box. Riley peeked out of the fur skins and saw that she was in a wagon. Anger flared in her heart. She reached her hands around the bars, trying to pull them apart. A shock flicked her back. She sat up. Why the hell did she get shocked every time she touched anything in this world? She sat up and tried again. Behind her, she heard a chain rustling. Frightened, she looked. A girl in a torn lavender dress sat across from her. The girl had huge, deep red curls. Her head lifted up, and she looked straight through Riley. It was the red-haired woman. The wagon halted to a stop, and the chain that held the woman was dragged out of the end of the wagon along with the woman. Riley watched in horror. Smoke surrounded the outside, and in place of where the woman was outside the cage stood a Padawan. He had long hair and blue eyes. His tan arms reached for Riley, pulling her out of the back of the wagon. Darkness flooded Riley's senses. She could feel being dragged off, but had no idea where. Chapter 38, Sarong the Great. Riley's eyes returned to the cloth covering her. Riley's eyesight returned as the cloth covering her fell to the floor. Her arms and legs weren't bound, but in her mindset all she could think about was the woman. She felt anger for that woman's sorrow. Trees covered around her, making a sheltered throne room. A throne made from bones and animal pelts sat across from her. Sitting in the folds of the chairs, a tall, muscular man appeared. He had pure black eyes. Riley could only associate that they reminded her of that demon's eyes off of her favorite show, Supernatural. His hair was long and barbaric, the color of darkness. A chill followed him around wherever he decided to walk. He kept Riley's astute attention. "Hello, Princess. You are a bargaining chip I can use to my advantage." Riley stayed quiet. She had to think about what she was going to do. Nothing like your mother, Evie. I want to know where Iolus is. He has something of mine and I want it back. He stepped closer to Riley, touching her face. All she could think was that she wanted to run away and disappear from everyone. But the thought of that woman crept into her mind. Why should she run? That woman and many other creatures were in need of her, even if she doesn't know where herself. Her eyes flashed to his pelt. "Who are you?" The man laughed, examining her neck and following down her body and back to her eyes. "Sarong, king of the Padua." She snapped him a smile. It startled him. Her fingers trailed down his chest. She grabbed his dagger and tried to cut him. She was going to do anything to escape. He flipped her around and held her tightly to him, his breath hot against her flesh. He held the dagger and her against him, and within a blink of an eye, he locked a golden bracelet on her wrist. The shock of the cool material against her skin made her drop the dagger. You're going to help me." Chapter 39, Clues. Riley had no idea that where the others were in the room. Sorry, that didn't make sense. Riley had no idea that there were others in the room. Everyone was being held against their will with a dagger against their throat. Aiden, Akmalutra, Taylor, and Felix. Anger flushed through Riley. She had a plan. "Fine, King Sarong. If you release them, I will stay and help you with whatever you need." She could feel the shift of excitement behind her. Dill. Each of her friends was hit hard in the head and drug off away from them. Last I heard, Iolus was headed to the Red Castle for Evie. Chapter 40, Escaping Sarong. Finally, only Riley and the king stood. "I cannot help myself, but I find you very mesmerizing." Riley could feel him starting to caress her skin and hair. Mine to do with as I please. Maybe after I use you for my needs, I will keep you for my wants." "Wouldn't hurt to have a taste of your flesh before our journey." Riley's skin crawled. Sarong turned Riley to face him once more, trying to pull Riley closer. She lifted her knee and kicked him between the legs and dashed out the door, running as far east as she could go. The Rovgon River lay just ahead. Sarong knocked her to the ground near the river. Riley bundles her fist and delivers a punch to Sarong. "No, I will not be yours." She screamed, kicking him off of her, crawling to the river, grasping for anything to help her escape. The weather turned warm, but angry clouds clung low in the sky. Snow fell quietly against the sound of her struggles. Uh-oh, spaghetti-o. What's gonna happen next? Chapter 41, Rovgon River Secrets. "Ah, yes, I see you have guided us to where I wanted us to be." Sarong stood, pulling Riley up onto her feet and dragging her to the edge of the river. Sarong grabs a strand of Riley's hair and yanks it from her head, taking it and blowing it over the banks of Rovgon River. To Riley's surprise, a hand pulled up from the surface of the water and grasped onto it. Out of the river, the hand turned to smoke and lifted off of the surface and stood on the other side of the river. "Hello, Sarong." Sarong smiled. "Hello, Flugon. I have a request of you." a request for you. Give me the location of Iolaus and I'll give you Riley. The Flugon gave a blank stare. I already possess her. She is mine whenever I feel like taking her with me. Sarang smiled. No, she is not. You see, I have a magical bracelet that she wears, and if she were to die, she would not return to you. This bracelet cuts your contract for her and also releases her soul from her body when she dies, and only I can remove it. The Flugon was pissed. Iolaus traveled west after the destruction of the Red Castle. Sarang smiled, whispering to Riley, Sorry, sweetheart, but if destiny was different, I would have kept you for my own. May our paths meet again in the future. He licked the side of her neck up to her face. You taste delicious. And then he shoves Riley into the river, the weight of the bracelet pulling her father under the surface. Chapter 42, Darkened Dive. Riley could feel that the Rovgon River was not like the other water plains in this dimension. She couldn't breathe, and the bracelet burned her flesh and drug her deeper. She tried to pull her hand away from the bracelet. The Flugon swam past Riley, grabbing at the bracelet, trying to pull it away from her wrist. But his attempts felt futile. After that, he tried just to use his force to drag Riley back to the surface. It worked. He pulled, and the bracelet followed behind, dragging on her wrist. He pulls her to the surface, lying her on the bank he was standing on before. Sarang tossed her away at his own free will. The Flugon was angry. How did he find a way to cancel out this contract? Nothing could do that except a gift from before time crossed into chaos. Chapter 43, Mermaid Effect. He lifted Riley's wrist to look at the bracelet, pure unadulterated gold, inscribed on the edge in Vivaldi. It read, You will always be my heart and soul, love forever and only yours, Nemosai. Anger flitted across the Flugon's eyes as he remembered long-forgotten myths. Only his only karma was for the one he loved to find her way back to wearing his bracelet he had made for her. Now his contract was dismissed. Damn bracelet, he said aloud, touching it once more. If it wasn't for that bracelet, she wouldn't have had to sacrifice her life. For love without chaos is not a sufficient love. All must suffer until you are mine again. Chapter 44, Disappearing Dreams. Riley felt cool. She opened her eyes above her. There was a man holding her. She didn't remember who he was, but he had kind eyes. Who are you? He smiled down at her. My name is Nemosai. She tried to sit up, but a dizzy spell made her rethink moving. Did you save me? He winked. Yes, I saw you drowning. I had a sudden urge to rescue you. Riley thought for a minute. Wait, aren't you the one Sarang wanted to speak to and why I was bargained away? He brushed a lock of her hair from her eyes. Yes, he will never hurt you ever again. You are safe. Riley reached up, and to his surprise, she kissed him back on the cheek. Thank you for rescuing me. He smiled. He had never been thanked for anything in the whole of his life as a Flugon. He touched her on the face, and she fell asleep again. He kissed her good night, and left before she awoke. Every chapter I gotta wiggle. I'm gonna get a drink before we start. We're in chapter 45, Ithaca. You remember Ithaca, right? The best horse in the whole damn world. Aiden's horse. I hope you remember what happened to her at the end of book 2. Otherwise, this isn't going to make sense. A nudge from a soft snout woke Riley. She felt like she was in a dream. She wasn't sure how she got by the river on this side or why she wasn't at the bottom. She only had 2 clues. Sarong traded her to a ghost of the river, and she was dry, wearing a golden bracelet. An inscription on the bracelet tugged at her heart. But there was one more thing. The black beauty of a horse stood above her. Riley stood up. "Who are you?" The horse neighed. Riley calmed it down with a gentle rub of her nose, and an image came to her. "Oh, Ithaca!" The horse made a jump for the sky with its 2 front legs, excited. Riley noticed a saddle and asked Ithaca if she could ride her. Ithaca bowed close to the ground to let Riley ride Ithaca. "Can you take me to Red Castle?" And the horse started to gallop really fast, east through to Castle Red. Chapter 46, Scavenging Red Catacombs. Riley hopped off of Ithaca and watched her ride off, running into a solid wall and disappearing into a smoke haze. It alarmed Riley. Did she just ride a dead horse ghost? She continued to walk. The castle was leveled. Some walls barely held onto nothing at all. She came to a room with chains hanging from the wall. She touched one of the links and saw a rising ocean of Evnia, climbing every level of the castle until it got to the one who it wanted. But it didn't tell them. She stepped back and stumbled into Sire Akmucha, staring off at the wall, eyes in such heated anger. Chapter 47, Secrets of Shonizar. Riley touched him on the shoulder and it zapped her back into the wall of chains. She stood up a moment later and walked back to him. She heard a whimper from behind her. She turned back to the wall above where she landed. The red-haired woman was chained and bleeding. She was barely clothed. She could hear mumbles of her voice. She turned back to Akumucha and realized he was who she was talking to. He was wanting her to himself, but with no words, only images. The evidence was damning. He had her chained up against her will. When those clues fell into place, she turned back to him. The man was all that stood left. This was my home until King Caleb took that and my Evie away from me. Riley couldn't believe it. You broke into my nursery and took her. You took her and you have the audacity to try to play an innocent fool? How could you treat her as if she were a piece of meat? She is a person, a very special, sacrificial person, and you and Iolaus pull her apart, hurting her with disregard for her feelings. Akumucha stepped forward, unsure what his next move would be. Don't touch me. You stay far away. And when I find her, you will never set your eyes on her again. Akumucha tried to stop Riley from leaving. She flipped around and slapped him hard in the face. It angered him. Don't test me, Akumucha. I am the chosen one, and if I see fit, I will obliterate you from existence. He stepped back, pulling back his animal side. Riley left the Red Castle catacombs and continued onward toward Shreve Grove. Clues are starting to piece together. Chapter 48, Travels. The road was paved in pebbles, and the air was smooth to breathe. Riley could see the 2 suns above the hilltops. Tree branches swayed with the help of the wind. Birds danced in the sky. Clouds were fluffy and happy. A roaring sound startled Riley. She looked up and around the sky. In the far distance, she could see dragons soaring about. To the west of her, she noticed huge spiders flinging from the trees, with creatures on their backs. She remembered their names. Alfred said there were Amphia Omnarchs riding Omgon widows. Oh, Alfred. Her heart ached for him. How was she going to find him? She thought back to her dream. A black castle in the ocean's waves, crashing violently against the rocks below. Where was that? Her mind was interrupted from branches droop in the bushes, cracking under her feet. Chapter 49, Life Interrupted. The snapping brought alarm to Riley. A huge guy stepped out of the woods. A sword was drawn. Riley turned around to run back the way she had come and bumped into another hooded figure. A sly third masked bandit appeared from her right. You be a nice little lass, and we might let you leave unharmed. Riley tried to keep her wits about her as she was figuring out a plan of action. Who are you, and what do you want? The guy behind her grabbed her and held tight. Money, fortune, a house in the country, and maybe a nice lass who will cook and clean for me. Why, do you want to be a part of my future? Riley couldn't hold her in her feelings. From within her eyes, she could see only a neon blue, lavender, and lime. Whoa, boys, did you see her eyes? The other guy said. Yeah, we could get a pretty penny for this beauty. The guy holding Riley shoved her to the leader. A pretty penny and something extra. Chapter William O'Will. Arrows flew soaring past Riley, knocking into two of the three bandits. The leader flipped Riley around and used her as a meat shield. Out from the shadows of the trees stepped another man, 6 feet tall and broad, blue eyes and blonde hair. He stood across from Riley. Using an innocent maiden as a meat shield is not very chivalrous, the leader laughed. She's mine. Leave now and I will forgive you. I will forgive you for taking my men's lives. The blonde rogue stepped forward, thought about it for a minute, then turned to go. Riley felt the tense bandit leader loosen his grip. The blonde rogue flipped around with his sword drawn, swinging up high enough. Riley ducked. The sword sliced the leader's head clean off. I think not, mate. Blood splurted everywhere. The thud behind her gave her a cue to stand up. Riley's eyes met his. Hello. She raised her hand to greet him. He smiled and looked at it and placed it in his palm in hers. She felt a zap. This time she did not fly backwards. He held her from falling. Hello, lass. My name is William Henry Shaw. What is yours? Riley smiled. My name is Margaret Riley Elena Wyler. My friends call me Riley. He stood for a moment, registered what was said. You are Lullaby. Riley had only heard that name from one other person, the red-haired woman from her dreams. William let go of her hand. I bet you are looking for answers. Follow me to Shreve Grove, and let's get you rested up. Riley knew by the light in his eyes that William Henry Shaw was an honorable kind of rogue, and so she followed him to where she was headed anyway. Without even realizing it, fate had stepped in and decided to lend her a helping hand. Chapter 51, The Towering Twins Inn. Ahead, beyond the house that slithered across the hills, across the hills beyond the trees. To Riley, it was as if she was back in Utah, traveling down I-80 toward Ogden. The arrangement of buildings climbed the beautiful mountains. She reached for the necklace, remembering her ride back towards Vermont. That weekend in October, she had seen 3 Days Grace and Seether with a number of other bands playing at USANA Amphitheater. She laughed mildly to herself, remembering Adam Gontier cursing to the audience that someone took his glove. It was mesmerizing. It was a great, good tour. It was great. Goodbye tour to Utah for Riley in 2011. She had made it back to Belvedere, Vermont, and just started to attend Rosemont Peak Boarding Academy a few weeks ago. Wow, a lot has happened since then. Now she was in another world, completely bewildered about the future to come. But she knew that she would do anything to fix things. She missed Alfred. She had to find him. She looked down at her wrist, a message from a Nemesis. Who was Nemesis, and why did it make her heart ache thinking about it? She glanced up at William. The suns glistened off of his hair. He stopped at a Victorian building. It was stunning. Come, Lullaby. He turned to her. Let's get you cleaned up before the sun set. Riley took a bath in a huge wooden tub. Afterward, she found her clothes had been washed and placed on the bed. She placed them on. She was still wearing the shirt that she had bought in Alfred and her skinny jeans, knitted black boots. Riley found a brush on the table and walked over to the standing mirror. Beginning to brush her hair, the image of Riley disappeared, and in its place was a darker room with candles lit. Riley looked around the room, and it was still day out. The candles were sleeping on her end. Riley looked back into the mirror, and the living images were still there. Riley walked to the mirror and touched the glass. It was cool under her fingertips. The room darkened around her. Riley turned from the glass, and her room was dark. The woman with red hair was sitting on the dresser with a dark-haired man kissing her. The candlelight showed the love between them. Suddenly, the light diminished and the man stepped back. Riley stepped to the other side of the room, paused, and another man stepped out from the mirror. Riley watched him take his blade and shove it into the dark-haired man. The blade crawled up to the man's face, and after extinguishing his light, the blade fastened itself back into one metal. The man pulled the dagger out, watching his victim fall to the ground. The dagger piked. On the dagger piked was the spirit of the victim. Riley's eyes met his as he was guided back to the mirror and shoved into the mirror realm. The man then pulled out something familiar, the twin golden stick. He flipped the dial, and the mirror cast itself as a solid once more. He said, "Come in, come." Blah, blah. He said some incoherent words that Riley couldn't make out. Then he turned to the red-haired woman and started time again. Riley stood stock still as she watched the dress fall on his body. The pounding on the mirror brought Riley back to reality. She turned to the victim that was looking at her, pounding ferociously. Riley wasn't sure what to do. The man could see her, but how come only one other time she could interact with the past? Riley tripped over the body, making him splurt out a gurgle of noise. Then all went dark and swirled. Suddenly she was on the other side of the mirror, but back in her own time. The birds chirped outside her window. Riley looked back at the mirror. The man was gone, but Riley could see the red-haired woman crying like she had lost her world. The sound came clear as ice chills stinging Riley's soul. Riley couldn't get the image out of her head. The man picked the woman up, said something to Riley's direction, and stepped into the mirror, but disappeared. Riley stumbled back into the chair, trying to catch her breath. She looked at the wood beneath the carpet. At a glance, no one would know what had happened, but Riley could see the blood stain. A knock at the door caught Riley's attention. "Yes?" The door creaked open. It was William. "Ready for dinner?" Riley replied. "Dinner? It was just morning." William came fully into the room. "No, you've been in your room for a whole day. We knocked and you never replied. It's dinner time now. Come down." Riley looked down at her hands. "Okay." She got up and followed him to the dining area. In the dining room, she sat across from William. He was so kind to her. It actually surprised her. "William, I have a question about the room upstairs." William looked at her. "You can call me Will. What is your question?" Riley felt aloof. Did you know that someone has died in the room?" William stopped smiling. "Yes, my Uncle Aiden McTavish." Riley closed her eyes. "Are you aware how it happened?" Will stopped pouring the mellow marshes. "No." Riley answered. "He was stabbed by a man who came through the mirror over a red-haired woman." William stayed silent. "I haven't told anyone this, but every time I touch things since I've gotten here, I've been seeing this red-haired woman everywhere. I cannot seem to shake her. I used to dream of her calling me lullaby, too." William stood up and left the room. Riley felt at a complete loss. She was lonely. She took a sip of her drink. It tasted like roasted marshmallows with a bit of chocolate and rum. Mellow marshes tasted delicious. She ate her dinner. Feeling a strain on her eyes, she got up and went to bed. The bedroom was dark. Riley found a white nightgown and slid into it before climbing into the big, comfy bed. It was strange how this room could hold so much tragedy, yet seemed as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. It was eerie. Riley closed her eyes. She started to dream of Alfred, his beautiful blue eyes and his warm form. She started to feel him touch her and comfort her. His lips were hot and he smelled different, like oak, musk, and citrus. She could feel him sliding up her nightgown and the parting of her legs. She touched him, tracing his chest down his neck and thighs. His shaft was hard and thrumming for her to open further for him. She reached up and pulled his mouth to consume all of her. He answered her slowly and then deeper than she had ever felt him before. His movements were intoxicating. He made her legs go numb. When he was finished, she opened her eyes, expecting to see Alfred, his beautiful eyes and his dark long curls. But instead, she saw Felix. He was kissing her all over her face. Riley couldn't believe it. He saw her looking at him. He smiled. "I couldn't wait for you. I just needed you. I regret nothing in our world. If I take you this way, you are rightfully mine by birthright." Anger flared Riley's eyes. She wanted to say, "Get off me," but she couldn't say those words. She pushed him off of her. He landed on the floor where the bloodstain was. Two blood hands pushed up from the floor and grabbed him. She got up and got dressed. No words could express her anger. These men think she is a prize to be won. She was not a piece of meat. How dare he? After she got dressed, she left him stuck to the floor, naked and in a bind. Chapter 52, Morning Fairies. The twin suns were peaking the mountains. Riley watched on the balcony as little fairies danced around on the grass. She had never dreamed of such creatures could exist. The sun's light lifted and covered the darkness like a blanket of warmth. A school of fairies ran but were too slow. Riley got an image of a red-haired lady sending a shield to help cover the fairies. Riley lifted her hand to do the same for the fairies that were dodging the suns. She tossed up her hand to help them, but her powers were gone. The fairies turned to stone, falling to the bed of grass near their hole. Riley looked back at her bracelet. Why couldn't she get it off? Chapter 53, Tree of Time. Beyond the stone fairies that lay on the grass, Riley noticed a tree. There was a sign hanging from it, Tree of Time. The sound of her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. She touched it, and the bark rumbled beneath her hand. All she could think of was a no, not again. Now she saw the red-haired woman sitting next to it, with her feet near the bank. The woman looked up at her, and without hesitation, "Are you going to find me, my sweet lullaby?" Riley had never heard her voice so clear. She wasn't even sure if it was real. "What?" The red-haired woman turned back to the edge of the pond. Riley noticed that in this vision, the sun had gone down. A shadow burst from behind her and started to wrestle with her. Riley screamed, noticing something silver fallen into the pond. Daytime appeared again, but this time Riley was wanting that trinket in the pond. A growling sound came from behind her. Riley ran away from the noise, headed north as far as she could think to go. Chapter 54, Shreve Grove Cemetery. A black iron gate appeared barren and fallen into chaos. Riley ran into the Shreve Grove Cemetery. The growling grew fainter as she ran up a winding path until it ended. A few crushed red roses clung to the headstone beneath, in loving memory of Aiden McTavish. The Vivaldi print glowed with the light of Eldor. Riley bent down and reached for the roses. An image of a red-haired girl crying and bleeding. The blood dripped down into the shallow grave. The image of a half-lichen and half-zombie corpse crawled out of the ground. Riley screamed, jumped backwards, and rolled all the way down the hill, hitting the headstone at the bottom. The shock of dizziness wavered her senses. She looked to her right. The red-haired girl was lying against the statue of an angel. The beast jumped at her, and before it could reach her, a beige lichen jumped from behind the angel statue, grabbing the lance and dealing the creature damage. The beige lichen turned toward Riley, then turned toward the red-haired girl, his wet fur disappearing into a mist, leaving a broad, tan body. He was very good-looking. He walked over toward the red-haired girl and bent low and was talking to her. He touched her with care. This time, a lightning strike ignited in a flash of light that lit up his features. He was the man who took her and disappeared into the mirror. Little things were becoming clearer little by little. He carefully unraveled the coils of the rope that bound her feet, each coil thorn dripping more blood as he pulled it from her flesh. He took the rope and tossed it into Riley's direction. It hit past her and landed on another headstone dangling. Riley walked over to it. It has 2 eyes, and the eyeballs were attached by a single optic nerve that had thorns sticking out like a rose's stem. Very interestingly disturbing. Their eyes are attached by one. Ours, it's 2 single optic nerves. Riley caught she was mumbling to herself. She turned back to the couple talking, and they were gone. The scene had dispersed. She walked back over to the stone. A handprint was all that was left of what had happened that night. She turned back to the lichen on a pike. He was gone. All that was left was a black, blood-stained pike sticking out of the ground. The growling was back. Riley got hair sticking up the back of her neck. She took a step back and turned and ran into someone she was not expecting at the cemetery. Lorelei. She smiled up at her name. Hello, Riley. Things started to come together. Have you found her yet? Riley stepped closer. No, nothing is as simple as it might seem. I've been looking everywhere. I keep getting images, and the visions are becoming more prominent and reoccurring much more. Let me help you understand better. I cannot ease your visions, but I can help you understand them better. Riley thought about that for a moment, smiled, and said, Okay, let's do this. Lorelei groggily. I'm getting tired, can you tell? Lorelei giggled a horrendously creepy noise. Her movements were slow, yet fast and cracked with every movement of her limbs. She reached up to Riley's temples on her head and pressed. A painful flash engulfed Riley. She screamed in agony. Chapter 55, Time Lapse. Images flooded Riley. She woke up from screaming down the hall. Riley got up and floated to the edge of the shell door. Peeking around the corner, Riley looked down at her body. She was small. Her hands were smaller than she remembered. She cracked the door open and quietly floated down the hall. In her parents' room were Amelia and King Caleb. She honed in on what they were saying as a curious child. How could you, Amelia? You played a very dangerous game. She would be our grandchild. Did you ever think about how our daughter would feel if she found out? You traded her daughter for your selfish needs and doomed the fate of all 5 worlds. When she finds out, she is going to be very cross with you. Amelia swam to her, stern King. But honey, we weren't getting pregnant and I wanted our family to grow. Please, just understand how badly we need her in our life. If you're not pleased, I can fix this. She was in tears. She turned to Riley and swam toward her, grabbing Riley up in her arms and holding a knife to her throat. I can fix this and everything will be all right again. Tears and strain filled the queen's attire. Riley could feel the sobs from her and the sharp end of the dagger to her throat. Please, Caleb, don't make me give her back. But if I must for our love, I will. Anger filtered Caleb's black eyes. He looked down at his weapon and thought for a moment, and the thoughts consisted of that she exists now and the future was unavoidable. But she could not continue to have this woman for her mother. Amelia had snapped and was a very unhealthy mother. He smiled up at her and zapped her against a wall. Riley dropped in a soft float to the ocean floor. She looked over to Amelia. Amelia was up against a wall, held tightly against it. Caleb blew some minty aroma into Amelia's face, putting her into a soft slumber, then zapped her with a flash. Amelia was stone. Riley screamed. Then she was pulled from the image. This time, Riley was standing in an empty space. Floating images from the future and past moved around her as if she were in space watching shooting stars. Then an image above and below her dropped, crushing her into another world entirely. She saw through a red-haired woman's eyes, taking in all the events that she had been through. Tears streaked Riley's eyes. I was supposed to endure all that, and she took my place because all she wanted to do was protect me. My mother, Ariana/Evie. Then the floodgates of reality came crashing back to her. When she awoke, she was nowhere near where she was supposed to be. She was by the tree of time. Chapter 56, Lily. Riley sat up, brushing her hair from her face. Lily. She heard that from inside her mind. She looked over to the pond. Vogon Pond. A light shone up from beneath, twinkling. Riley stripped down to her bra and underwear. She dived into the frigid water, swimming farther down to the bottom. She couldn't figure out why she needed it, but she needed it. Chapter 57, Discovering Lily. Deeper beneath, fish swam by her. Riley saw that as she swam closer to the glowing objects that the colors would change and the shape would morph, letting a bass sound and vibration thrumming off of it. Riley's lungs began to get tighter as she craved air. She reached around the object. A white light filtered her senses. She grasped it in her fingers and held it tight to her chest. Chapter 58, Fears. She turned to leave, and her bracelet caught on something below the surface. She could not move or budge. She thought quickly. She tucked the object into her bra and chain around her strap. With her second hand free, she tried to entangle herself from the object, but to no avail. It was dark. Her lungs filled full of the water. She didn't know what to do. She closed her eyes, feeling the darkness overwhelm her senses. A deep calmness overcame her. She slept. When she finally let go of everything in this world, her bracelet started to glow bright and throw off a noise that only all the creatures in their world could hear. It made a lot hunch over in pain and cry. Chapter 59, Rescues. Felix was lying on the floor, still attached to the bloody hands that held him in place. A noise came from outside. It shook all of Imbala. The hands pulled back to the floorboards. Felix sat up. The noise was annoying. He ripped up some cloth and shoved it into his ears. He had one thought in his mind: I must find her. He quickly dressed and ran down the stairs, following the noise that everyone was cowering away from. As he approached Levon Pond, he could see the vibrations on the surface as if a thunderstorm was happening around the edges from within. He took off his clothes and dived beneath the surface, following the golden light. In lichen form, he could swim faster, as if the currents were opening up to reveal what lay hidden. The light got brighter. When he touched the light, it revealed itself as a golden bracelet. The light crawled from the bracelet up Riley's arm to show her whole form. Felix removed his dagger and sliced near the bracelet, cutting her free from the dew clinger, vine-like creatures that guard only the most precious finds. He pulled her to the surface, lying her down next to the tree of time. He began to dress her, covering her modestly. He then dressed. A cracking noise in the forest around them let loose. He picked up Riley and ran to the red barn. The light of Eldor shone above them, and then the storm set in, covering all the darkness, and rain patted heavily against Felix's brown coat of fur, soaking it. He laid her down on the soft bed of hay. Riley whimpered in her sleep. Felix had never seen her act so vulnerable and open before. It frightened him and yet intrigued him. He started to feel like love was possible. She was beautiful in every way. He bent down and kissed her lips. The bracelet zapped her awake as their lips were locked together. She was shocked. She pushed him off of her and sat up. I need to go back to Rovgon River and talk to the Flugon. And she left out of the barn. Chapter 60, Nemosai. I think this is my favorite chapter, okay? Well, one of my favorite chapters. By the light of the twin suns, Riley reached Rovgon River where she had met the Flugon. Her mind reeled back to the chaotic blackouts that she kept having near this river. She needed to speak to him, or it, but she was unsure of how to contact him. Snow flittered down from the clouds, softly hanging on the surface of the river, sizzling to the touch. The first time she avoided a strange light, then was back to Skull Waterfall remains. The second time, Surong talked to someone and threw her in. She didn't know how she got back to the surface. She pulled out the lily. It was trapped inside a glass seashell that had silver specks spread all over it. She looked it over and then put it back inside of her pocket. Riley bent down and picked up a small flattened skipping stone. It felt cool as ice. She skipped it to the other side of the river, watching it dance above the current. It was beautiful. Hot breath danced on her neck. She closed her eyes, feeling the sensation. Then she turned, and before her stood the Flugon. He was taller than she would have guessed. There was something familiar about him that shook her whole DNA helix. Are you the one who made the deal with Amelia? He gave her a quizzical look. Why, yes, I am. Riley smiled. Good, I found you, and with one smooth, emotionless motion, she sucker punched him in the side of the face. The fast and precise contact stunned him for a minute. He was not expecting that. What the hell is wrong with you? You cannot play everyone and think that you will not pay for the consequences at which you have accrued. We are not toys. We are not your toys, and what you did was wrong, and you damn well know it. You ripped a mother from her child because of me. You wanted to bring chaos to all life? How can you sit there and enjoy yourself for the shit you are pulling? People have died over this prophecy. People have gone through hell because of you. You are disgusting, and guess what? The story isn't going to play out the way you think. I will make sure you lose, and everything you are trying to do will unravel. This ending is mine. Riley turned to leave, and the Flugon stood shocked, but had to do something. He turned to Smoke and to catch her from leaving. He definitely did not expect to wake up to a punch this early in the morning. Wait, Riley, wait. I can explain. Riley stopped and looked at him. He reached to brush the fingers through her hair. She knocked his hand away. Fine. He smiled down at her. I did it for you. I've been waiting for your return. Riley was getting sick of everyone treating her like this. You did it for yourself. My mother and father tried to keep my happiness from being ruined. I could have had a normal childhood, but hey, my life is a game for you, huh? I get no choice, huh? Well, guess what? I'm not going to deal with your shit anymore. Riley lifted her hand, grabbed the bracelet, and ripped it off. Stay away from me, Nemosai. Then she left. Alright, I'm going to stop this here, and we'll continue with Chapter 61 in the next video. I love you guys. Have a great day. Please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share, and join me again tomorrow. Bye.